Welcome everyone to the Community Infrastructure Service Committee. We have several items today on our agenda, and we have a mover for consent items. Councillor Galloway Sealock. Oh, sorry, I haven't had the system up yet here. Councillor Fernandez, do you have a question?
Oh, sorry. No, I did not. Sorry. Oh, yes, I did. Sorry. Apologize. Thank you. I did have a question on item number 2, which, if possible, I realize it's a consent item, but it's quite a substantial report of 115 pages or more, I think. So I get, do we need to move it from consent to discussion? No. Item number 2, drinking water quality management standards.
Okay. Yeah, do we need to move it? Yes.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, thank you. So this is a really lengthy document. So, and I know I've seen it before, but maybe some of the new councillors may not have. So can you help us understand why we receive this lengthy document, especially because I'm noting that the reports and some of the components date back as far as 2008.
Ms. Mick, care to address that?
So why you're receiving it now and not 2008?
Right. Well, yeah, as well as, I mean, it includes quite a number of components through it. I mean, some of them are dated 2015, some of the reports are dated 2009, 2008. So maybe it just give us a bit of a sort of a summary as to why we received this detailed of a report with all of this background.
Sure. This report was brought forward in 2008, I believe, as well. So we originally brought it forward for endorsement at that time. So it was a similar document back then. And as part of a quality management system, we're into continual improvements. So as part of that, one of the things was we should probably bring this forward. There's new members of council and let them see this report as well. And we are constantly changing it. The operational plan gets updated at a minimum once a year. So it is it's a changing document as well. And you get summarized on the system once a year in February with the management review for council.
Okay. So with this very detailed report, are there red flags as we're looking and reviewing it? Are there red flags that we should be looking for? And where would they be in this plan? And what areas of concerns would be addressed during the re-endorsement of this operation plan?
Through the chair. No, there's no red flags through this. This is just telling you that we've got it covered. We have procedures and work instructions for the 21 elements that we are required to have those for. And if there are any red flags, they come forward through the management review. So that's when we actually tell you about what's going on with our system. You know, are we having issues with maintenance, things like that. This plan just tells you this is how we would address certain things. For example, the management review. There's a procedure in here on how we conduct ourselves for a management review. There's a procedure for document control. There's a procedure for sampling, testing, monitoring. Basically, there's a procedure for everything that the regulations require us to have a procedure for, and that's this document is just letting you know that we've got it covered, and that's what we're doing.
Okay. And I mean, in the report, you talk about the fact that there are legal consequences for negligence due to the standard of care and the Safe Drinking Act, right? So does this address those legal obligations, this report?
Through the chair, it is part of the obligations for you to have an awareness of the quality management system, of who's responsible for water quality. It's up to the operating authority to make sure that's done, but as the owner, you have an obligation. So one of the things is, yes, you're aware that this document exists and that you're hiring people and people to make sure that this happens.
Okay. So there would be really no place for council to be making any changes to this operational plan?
Through the chair, continual improvement can come from any direction. So if there was something that For example, how the final report is brought forward to you, if there's something like that you would like to see changed, by all means, we can incorporate that or review it. But really, for the day-to-day things, I wouldn't think that you would have those comments, but we're always open to suggestion.
And that's kind of what I was thinking, was that it wasn't necessarily the day-to-day, but should there be items of concern, I think that because there is a legal consequence if there were certain standards that had not been met, would that not be important for us to understand within the report?
Through the chair, that would come through on the management review. So as part of the management review, we go through our non-compliances and non-conformances. So we would advise you of things like that at that time, not necessarily through this kind of document, but through an annual summary. We would flag any issues we were having. You could see the results of the Ministry of Environment inspections, of our third-party audits, our internal audits at that time.
Okay. And when was the last time this area was audited, both either internally or externally?
Through the chair, we just received our third-party audit a few weeks ago.
Oh, okay. And who did the audit?
SAI Global.
Okay.
And
Mr.
just
Taegi, you have something to add?
Through you, Mr. Chair, through you, just want to clarify that staff certainly will do and has done in the past their due diligence in terms of reporting what and if there are any concerns. However, having done that, though, it does not relieve council members from their obligations. And one of the reasons you have this report in front of you is that you do have an obligation, apart from what the staff is doing, to make sure that you understand the documents. And if you don't, if you have any questions, then staff will certainly assist you in that regard. But this document is in front of you for a purpose, and the purpose is that each and every member of council has an obligation under the Act, and as such, staff is doing its part in bringing this report out to you, but then rest is up to you to make sure that you understand the document, and because you do have a responsibility under the Act. So just wanted to clarify that part.
And I appreciate you doing that, because that's the reason for my questions. Because of that legal responsibility, I in a way, I'm kind of concerned that it comes as a consent item, because I think it is important for all of us, and it's such a lengthy document. I mean, I don't have the expertise, and I think it might be worth bringing it forward as a discussion item or some kind of a strategic discussion sometime in the future with council to go through some of these components for us to make sure that we understand that when we say yes to this report, that we're saying yes, we are aware of the legal implications, and that the standard of care under the Safe Drinking Water Act has been fulfilled through this document, right? So that would be sort of my suggestion. I'd like to understand if that needs more than just my suggestion. Maybe more members of council would like to chime in on this, because understanding the criticalness and the legal consequences, I think having an opportunity to have a discussion. I know that we had a standard of care workshop from the region. I attended that. I don't know how many other councillors did. So,
through you, Mr. Chair, I think one of the reasons, as Angela pointed out, this report is in front of you today, is because there are, I think, two new members of council. And we just wanted to make sure that even though the members of council who were here in 2008 and since that time, they certainly will be quite aware of, or should have been quite aware of, the content of this report and similar reports in the past, plus our management reports that come to you every year. It was really for the benefit of the two new members of council, so that they are aware also of the contents of this report, and they are aware of their obligations under the Act.
So just the two, it's not just the two councillors that have been here. Only Councillor Galloway Sealock was here in 2008. None of the rest of us were here. Well, sorry, yeah, but Barry and John are not here at the moment. So I'm just talking about Councillor Galloway Sealock in terms of right here. So, anyways,
my apology if I misspoke.
No, that's okay.
And I think we certainly will be quite happy to If you have any particular questions about the report, any member of council, we certainly will be quite happy to either meet on one-on-one, or if that's a desire of the council, we could also meet in a group and explain parts of the document that may not be clear to you.
Okay. I'd like to hear if other councillors feel that way beside myself. Thank you.
Okay, we have no further questions on the consent items. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We're going to have to take a 1 minute break to switch over because we're in the council system and not a... Sorry. Okay, so next item, is, that probably wasn't heard. So next order of item on the business is the City of Kitchener-Wilmot Township Cross-Border Service Agreement. And that's going to be brought up by Angela. Go ahead, Ms. Mick.
Through the chair, Kitchener and Wilmot would like to sever the current operating relationship with Wilmot and enter into a new agreement. Currently, Wilmot owns the infrastructure in Manheim and Chingletown, but Kitchener operates the water for approximately 400 residents and the wastewater for approximately 77 residents. The existing agreement is no longer sufficient due to changing regulations. Kitchener will continue to be billed by the region for water use, and we will bill Wilmot for the water and the sewer use. Are there any questions on the report?
Yeah, we have a question for you. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yes, sorry. So I looked at the resolution as in on page 8-3, and there's a bunch of whereas clauses, and I got the impression I didn't get the final thought on it. Like, we're looking to do a separate agreement, and that's like period.
Through the chair, we are separating, but because the water has to flow through Kitchener and because the sanitary has to come back through Kitchener, there's a lot of sorting out in the agreement. So things like who's responsible for what and at what rates, that's what the agreement's going to sort out. So we are severing the relationship, but we're still tied together. It's the operating component that we really want to sever.
Okay. And then under the financial implications, it talks about $233,000. That's a one-time transfer that we have to send over to Wilmot?
Through the chair, yes it is.
And then ongoing, there shouldn't be any more transfers?
Through the chair, they will pay us for the water and sewer.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Yaneski.
Yes, thank you. I've read over the report, and I don't have any concerns in terms of where you're going on this, and I think it's fine. However, just a matter of maybe making sure that everything's been covered. I did some research from trying to understand where this how it all unfolded back in the 50s and 60s, and through my contacts, this was prior to these lands being part of Kitchener, and it was all in the operations of the Utilities Commission back at that time, before it got incorporated with the City of Kitchener in 78. And sorry, in 73, I should say. So was there any research done and tying in with the region when it came on board in 73 to know what understanding and arrangements may have been done with the township prior to 73, and whether you've contacted and talked with the region because you said there's a lot of uncertainty, and I know you're updating the stuff, and so at that time, did you contact the region, or did you need to do that or not?
Through the chair, yes, we contacted the region. We're meeting with them ongoing. Their operating relationships, even with the City of Kitchener, the agreement is it's very slim, I guess I should say.
It's almost a handshake.
Yeah, really. And we couldn't find any documents. It was just, like you said, going through contacts and trying to find somebody who remembered what happened. So the region didn't have any documentation on that either.
Well, I talked to previous engineers who were working with the city back in the 50s and 60s, and they said there was very little that the city was involved with at that time because it was the Water Commission and their jurisdiction at that time and their responsibility. So there was a very little liaison between the two. And then when regional government came in 73, the Utilities Commission folded, and we're just assuming that that documentation maybe went to the region. So that's where I'm just trying to make sure one can provide you with another lead or whatever. So just a little bit of the history. So I didn't know whether that would have an implication on the new stuff, although I know it's stuff updated over the years, so it may not be relevant at all, but I wasn't certain, so that's it.
Thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. Just I don't have a problem with that. Just one question. How does this agreement affect staffing before and after?
Through the chair. When we were located at Elmsdale, so Kitchener Utilities was at Elmsdale location, we were a lot closer to Wilmot, so operating was easier. Now it's quite a drive to get out there, so staffing levels won't change, but the infrastructure that we do maintain, it will be more cost effective to do so when you're not driving so far. We are also, if you remember the drinking water quality management review I was just speaking about, we flag maintenance as one of our issues, so we're having issues maintaining our own system, and we're maintaining someone else's system, so I think those resources could be better spent on our own system.
Okay, yeah, that was where I was going. So we will have a free up in staffing in some ways, but we'll better service our own. Very good, thank you.
Okay, we have no further questions. It's been moved by Councillor Schneider. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next item of business is the 2014 Stormwater Management Audit Report, and it'll be presented to us by Leah Walter and Nick Nolan. Go ahead, Nick.
Good afternoon, committee chair and members. As part of the 2001 Stormwater Management Policy, an annual monitoring program is to be completed each year. The staff report summarizes the monitoring program and practices carried out to date in each of the categories included in the citywide plan. A steering committee made up of the City of Kitchener, Grand River Conservation Authority, Region of Waterloo, and the city's consultants conduct this audit and monitoring program annually. So I'm pleased to provide Staff Report INS 15038, which contains the results of the 2014 Stormwater Monitoring Program and audit along with the recommendation that the 2014 SWIM Audit Technical Memo be endorsed by Council. At this point, I'd like to introduce Nicole from AECOM to provide a brief presentation on the results, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Welcome, Nicole.
Thank you very much. So I'm just going to go through a bit of background, some summary results, some key findings, and some recommendations. So thank you very much for having me here, ladies and gentlemen, councillors, Mr. Chair. Okay, so as Nick mentioned, in 2001, the SWIM audit program was Stormwater Management, which I will refer to as SWIM, I hope that's okay, audit program began. It's been going on every year since then, and this will outline the 2014 program. So the monitoring program has remained relatively unchanged since 2001, and that allows us to compare between years. So based on recommendations from the 2013 report, 7 sites were identified for water quality monitoring and biological monitoring, which includes benthic invertebrates and fish monitoring. Additionally, 2 sites were monitored using a flow proportionate system, which is an automatic sampling system. And those 2 sites also had physical monitoring, so flows and temperatures. As I mentioned, we've been doing this since 2001, and many years of data is required to identify trends within the stormwater management system and identify elements that need rehabilitation, and to monitor rehabilitation that we've done in order to identify whether it's worked and fix it if it hasn't. So these are the monitoring sampling locations, and the big red circles I put on there are not showing up. So hopefully you can see the on your screens the blue raindrops that show where the monitoring locations are. They are throughout the city, and they represent many different types and sizes of watercourses, some with highly urbanized catchments and some with more natural catchment areas. Oh, there they are. Sorry, they all just came up. There they are. So you can see them a bit better. The black circles identify the 2 flow proportionate sampling locations from 2014. So I'm just going to go through a series of photos just to give you an idea of what the sampling locations look like. So this is Hidden Valley, which is just downstream of Hidden Valley Road between that and the confluence with the Grand River. This is Strasburg Creek near Trillium Drive. It's got a fairly industrial catchment area. This is Idlewood Creek near the end of Zeller Drive. It's between Zeller Drive and the confluence with the Grand River, so right at the downstream end. This is Strasburg 2. It's a fairly natural catchment near Bean Drive in the central branch of Strasburg Creek. This is Sandrock Greenway near Highland Road West and Fisher-Holloman Road, a pretty urbanized catchment area. Schumacher Creek near Mill Street and Borden Parkway. Balzer Creek near Fallowfield Drive and Brisbane Drive, downstream of Fallowfield Road. And Cold Creek near Otterbein Road and Misty Street, which is right very close to the confluence with the Grand River. And that was one of the flow proportionate sites. So the auto sampler. It's also one that we've done several years of temperature monitoring on in the past. And this is Montgomery Creek at the end of Wilson Drive. This location gets lots of runoff from the highway system within the city. So water quality monitoring, a bit of about what we did. In 2014, we had 5 wet and 5 dry weather samples. So wet being after about 10 millimeters of rain or more, dry being after a few days of no rain. And we did 1 melt, which we call winter sample. It's when the snow is melting. So we take a look at chlorides from salt entrainment into that melt water. We collect samples from the creeks and take it to a lab for total suspended solids, total phosphorus, dissolved phosphorus, nitrate, E. coli, lead, zinc, copper, the metals, chloride, which gives us the salt, a look at how salt reacts within the system, and then hardness, which allows us to calculate some impact from the other parameters. We also, when we're out there, measure parameters using a handheld measuring device, so dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature, and conductivity at the time that we sample. We also do biological monitoring. So these are 2 pictures of fish. It's harder to take the pictures of the invertebrates, they're smaller. But we take benthic invertebrate community sampling from the bed of the stream, and then fish community sampling using an electrofishing device. We use standard protocols, the Ontario Benthic Biomonitoring Network Protocol and the Ontario Stream Assessment Protocol. As I mentioned, we did flow and temperature monitoring at the 2 auto sampling stations, Cold Creek and Montgomery Creek. So just a brief description of the results. So we had 1 very good performer this year, Strasburg Creek. As I noted, that's a more natural catchment area, and so it does look quite a bit better. It's also had some significant rehabilitation work done on it in the past few years, so it's performing very well right now. Poor performers include Montgomery Creek. As I mentioned, it has a lot of the highway drainage going to it, and Balzer Creek as well. So we have a few sites that have 8 or more years of data over the past 13 or 14 years. And this is just sort of a summary of some trends that we've seen. Chlorides going up in a few of those locations, as well as E. coli. Montgomery Creek has had reducing nitrates. Balzer Creek increasing phosphorus levels, decreasing dissolved phosphorus in Strasburg Creek. And Montgomery Creek lower zinc and lead in a couple of the creeks, including Strasburg. So overall water quality has decreased or gotten a little bit worse in Sandrock Greenway, and overall water quality has improved in Strasburg Creek Station 2 and in Schneider Creek Station 2. So, as I mentioned, the winter events, the meltwater events over the past few years, those are fairly new to the program, have provided some additional insight into the impact of road salt. This past year, we also did total suspended solids monitoring in all of the ponds within the city of Kitchener that were accessible. That was 108 ponds in 2014, and just a couple months ago, the same 100 of the same ponds. We saw 74% of pond samples return positive removal efficiency, so that means that the total suspended solids going into the pond is more than going out, which is the purpose of the pond, is to remove total suspended solids from the water so that it's cleaner when it leaves the pond. And 27% returned negative efficiency, so it was actually the water was getting more sediment in it as it went through. There's lots of reasons associated with that. We did it when there was ice cover on the ponds. And that can lead to some short-circuiting, so it's not a total surprise that that was the case. And so for the 2015 program, we're continuing to monitor at many of the stations, the core stations that we've developed over the last few years. We are revisiting the Henry Sturm site, which has been sampled recently as part of the Victoria Park Lake work. And the two flow proportionate sites for this year are at that Henry Sturm site and at Strasbourg too. The program this year includes sediment volume measurements at the stormwater ponds in order to inform future remediation at those ponds. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Yes, we have a question for you. Councillor Fernandez.
Hi, thanks. Just a actual quick question for Nick. This is not the same presentation that you did to the Environmental Committee, is it? Because I've got the Environmental Committee and there was a number of different...
Through the chair, it's very similar. There might be a couple of slides that are different.
Okay, all right. I guess because there was some information that I wish had been shared with the staff as well as, with the community as well as this committee, and that's certainly about the evolution of the stormwater management pond and the different stormwater systems. That map is a really excellent map that shows all of our water courses and things. So, sorry, just to go to the delegation, this is not AECOM's first year doing this. You've done it before, but...
So AECOM did the monitoring from 2001 to 2010.
Okay.
And then we did 2014, and we're doing 2015 again.
Okay, all right. So do you look back at the history that you have, that you've captured, and where some of these creeks and stormwater ponds have been and where they're going?
Sure, yeah, and so that's where I noted the 4 where we have 8 or more years of data, and we look at the trends across the years for those ones, yeah.
Okay. And how many spots or stations, like I know that in Strasbourg you've got 2 on the map that I have from the Environmental Committee. Balzer Creek, there's 1, Hidden Valley, there's 1. But some of these creeks, like Schneider's and Dune Creek and Strasbourg Creek, sort of come together at at certain points. Do you do a spot check there to see if the 3 different creeks are bringing different materials into, because at that point they almost connect into the Grand?
Yeah, sure. Excuse me. So so on Schneider there are several sampling locations. So Schneider Creek 1 is sampled by the GRCA as part of the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network, and so we incorporate that information into our report as well. Schneider 2 is just upstream of that. And then we have the Henry Sturm location just upstream of Victoria Park Lake, and Sandrock Greenway is on the Schneider system as well, so we can separate those 2 out. Historically, we've also sampled at Westmount Drain. So those are the sort of main locations along Schneider Creek. Strasbourg, I think, has more than 13 locations that have been sampled historically. In 2001, there was sort of a blitz where they did quite a lot, especially for the benthic invertebrates, so that they could come back and look at it later. And so that's why there's 13. I think we've sampled at SB 2, 3, and 13 frequently in the past 15 years. but so those sort of parse out the different branches and locations on Strasbourg. And then there are a couple, Idlewood, we've done two different locations, Idlewood 1 and Idlewood 3, historically a few times. And then on the Voisin system, there's been a couple of locations historically when there's sort of been complaints about the system.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for identifying all those. You said one of the slides showed that 27% more sediment was found. You might want to go back because
Sure.
it was 27% was one, and then there was a higher number of. Is it possible to go back?
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. So, 74% pond sampled returned positive, but the 27 returned negative. So that's still close to a third. That the return is still of negative into the creeks, right?
Yeah, and the original plan had been to sample once in melt conditions and once in a summer storm. The staffing effort to get that to happen, most of the rainfall events, unfortunately, through September, October, November of last year happened in the evening or on a weekend, and we just couldn't get enough staff mobilized on those time frames to get the sampling done in the fall. So we did another melt sample to be able to compare back and forth to get a repeated sample. So it is a melt weather event. There's ice on the ponds, and that can certainly reduce the ability of the pond to remove sediment in two ways. One, the ice itself takes up volume within the permanent pool of the pond, and the permanent pool helps to remove the sediment. So if you fill that with ice, then it's not doing its job as well. It also allows a clear path for water to go over top of it. So there's no sediment removal at all, essentially, in the pond when that happens.
Do you make recommendations to our staff on what next steps should happen? I mean, I know that we're doing a master plan for our stormwater management ponds, but are there specific recommendations or red flags that you pass on to our staff, or areas that you're of great concern?
I think this is a common issue across Ontario and anywhere where there is a severe winter. That's stormwater ponds are designed for summer storm conditions. So it's an interesting result, and I think there's probably a bit more that can be done with the data that to look at sort of catchment areas and things that hasn't. But I don't think there's any sort of specific thing that could be done to fix the problem. It's a sort of the way the standards are for designing the ponds from a provincial government level. So at this point, I wouldn't say there's anything specific, but that's...
Okay. Were you going to say something? Is that...
Through the chair, I was just also going to add that as part of the work in 2015, we're going to measure the sediment volume in every one of our ponds so that we get a snapshot of how much they've collected over the years, and also to help inform the master plan as far as prioritizing which ponds should be cleaned out in which order, type of thing. And I think these results here show us that clearly we could be doing a little bit better than what we're doing, and it's a matter of putting together a work plan to clean out those ponds and hopefully get some better performance out of them.
Okay. I know I'm over time, so is there another? I have one other question then, and it's really more directed to staff. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Is it not just only about the design of the stormwater management pond, but also about the mitigation that happens upstream? So, and of course, my special interest has always been Strasbourg Creek. With the amount of development that happens along that creek, especially in the last 10 years, there's been a significant change to the creek. And although we spent a lot of money and we did some great work on one section of the creek, there's still a lot of downstream problems happening. Should we also be focusing on mitigation, not just about the ponds itself?
So through the chair, erosion and sedimentation on new construction is a challenge everywhere in the world. So staying on top of those practices during the construction process is quite important. But there is already a significant amount of mitigation that goes into. There are erosion and sedimentation control plans for new developments, and typically they also have their own stormwater ponds, which actually start as sediment basins, so they capture a lot of the sediment before it leaves the site, and then they get converted into the final finished stormwater management pond. But there's so that's something to always be aware of and to stay on top of.
Do they clean out those ponds before we take them over, before we assume them?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have no further questions. Thank you, Ms. Weber and Mr. Moline. Do we have a mover on this? Councillor Fernandez. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Next item is item number 10, dealing with the Trustler Road Traffic Calming Review. Mr. Reedman.
Thank you and good afternoon. So staff is recommending that white edge lines and yellow center line be painted on Trustler Road from Highland Road to Iron Needles Boulevard. In addition, staff is recommending the installation of 3 50-kilometer-an-hour speed limit signs and 3 oversized no heavy truck signs with $110 fine tabs. Trustler Road, which is classified as a minor collector neighborhood street, was identified as a traffic calming project in 2013. Trustler Road is owned partially by the Township of Wilmot, and the Township does not support the installation of vertical measures such as speed humps. The recommended changes to the roadway have achieved the required support to move forward with installation. The City of Kitchener is funding the $3,000 worth of measures as the implementation of the traffic calming project was initiated by City of Kitchener, and it will be funded from the traffic calming capital budget. Should Committee and Council approve the recommended plan today, the measures are anticipated to be installed later this summer.
We have a question for you. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. So, as you mentioned, my understanding is if it wasn't for the Township of Wilmot, we might be looking at vertical measures here. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that was a suggestion from one of the citizens along the street, and that was ruled out as part of the process when we were engaged with the Township.
Okay. Obviously, you're satisfied this will mitigate some of the speeding in the area. But what I'm struck by is the overwhelming number of people that are in support of this. So I'm wondering if this is any indication of perhaps changes in terms of moving away from vertical measures in the future.
Through the chair, we have done that through our revised traffic calming policy, which was approved by Council in 2013. This project did start before the approval of that policy. So we do look at every street on a case-by-case basis. This road in particular is a wide rural cross-section, so the painting of edge lines actually gives a psychological feeling for a narrower street rather than the wide open asphalt that exists there currently.
Okay. And because it's much less, because the total dollar value is much less, does that, and forgive me, I don't remember exactly how many streets we are to do per year, but $3,000 and typically the costs are much greater. Does that mean we're going to have capacity to do an extra street conceivably in this year or next year?
Through the chair, the majority of our recent traffic calming projects are a little bit more expensive than the $55,000 that are allocated, so this will offset some of the impacts from other projects.
Oh, so we're catching up then. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. The only thing I didn't see on here, and maybe because it's a fairly busy road, nothing for markings for cycling lanes at all. I mean, I know that, and I looked it over again a couple of times thinking, okay, there should be something in here. So can you help me understand why?
Through the chair, there's not enough space to permit the addition of cycling lanes based on the existing asphalt width. And the actual volume is about 1,600 vehicles per day. So if you look at the Minister of Transportation's Book 18, that's sort of in the area where cycling lanes aren't necessarily warranted. It's just on the cusp between warranting bike lanes and providing shared use facilities. So cyclists could use the area beyond the edge line, just like Cortland Avenue in the City of Kitchener. So those aren't official bike lanes, but oftentimes cyclists will use that extra space at the side of the road.
Okay. That's what I was thinking, that maybe you're trying to accommodate cyclists without actually legitimizing that area for cycling. That's what I'm hearing.
Through the chair, if this street is open for reconstruction in the future, we would look at the ability to provide bike lanes at that time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We have no further questions. It's moved by Councillor Davey. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item number 11, closure and lease of Agnes Street and declaration of surplus for easement purposes.
As part of the reconstruction of Dominion Street, sidewalks are being constructed on both sides of the roadway. The Kitchener-Waterloo Badminton Club owns the property located at 69 Agnes Street, as well as the triangular property bound by Park Street, Dominion Street, and Agnes Street. The triangular property serves as parking for the badminton club members, as well as a source of revenue generation for the club by renting out space to employees during weekdays. The parking area encroaches on the Dominion Street right-of-way, and the installation of sidewalks will require the removal of a portion of the parking lot. The KW Badminton Club approached the local ward councillor, the mayor, and city staff to identify an opportunity to minimize parking impacts from the sidewalk installation. Through that dialogue, Agnes Street between Park and Dominion has been identified as a redundant piece of roadway as it runs parallel to Dominion Street for a short distance. Staff is recommending that this portion of Park Street be closed and deemed surplus, and that it be leased to the KW Badminton Club for a nominal fee of $1, so long as the club operates as a nonprofit. It should be noted that the club functions as a community center for local citizens, which has led to staff's recommendation of the fee structure. Closures of roadways are identified as Schedule A prime activities under the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Act, and as such require that notification be provided to affected persons. Notification will be provided by circulating a letter to affected agencies, such as utility companies, by placing notification sign near the proposed road closure, and notifying the local community through the newspaper. The lease will be structured to permit access to utilities remaining within the right-of-way to municipal employees and agencies when needed. While staff proposes funding the cost of the closure through the Dominion Street reconstruction budget, any changes to the asphalt to permit reconfigured parking will be at the cost of the KW Badminton Club. Staff is bringing this report forward at this time in order to seek approval to complete the required steps to close the roadway prior to the sidewalk being installed in August.
We have a few questions for you. Councillor Etherington.
Not in the form of a question, Mr. Chair. I'd just be prepared to move it as when the time comes.
Okay.
It's a result of numerous discussions between involving the badminton club, which has invested heavily in that building and really improved the building. So everyone agrees to the solution, and as I say, I'd be prepared to move it when the time comes.
Okay. Councillor Singh?
Yeah, I'll quickly speak to support of the item. I think this is a great example of a collaborative approach between the city and a not-for-profit organization facilitated by the ward councillor, so congrats on that. My question is on the financial implications. It states as $1,200 for an advertisement as per the requirement of the bylaw. So we have to advertise in, I guess, a local media outlet, or can we advertise online as well on our city website?
Through the chair, typically municipalities advertise in the newspaper for municipal class environmental assessment projects. We can also choose other means. So this isn't a full schedule B or C project. So there's a little bit of gray area.
Well, that's why I asked. Exactly. I wouldn't have asked otherwise, yeah. But I don't see any major opposition coming from this. Sure. So if you can look at other means that could be a lesser impact, I would advise it.
Councillor Yaneski.
In regard to the closure of Agnes, I don't have any concern on that, but I do recall back several weeks ago, a delegation was here, a gentleman from the president from the badminton club, who's the constituent in my ward, and I know this is in Councillor Etherington's ward. He had concerns about the reconstruction that was happening along Dominion Street and elimination of some parking spaces. Has that all been resolved in the end?
Mr. Allen?
Through the chair, it's true, yeah, the city wants to put a sidewalk in on the Dominion frontage, and it will cut into his existing parking lot, but it is all city land. I think the situation we're talking about right now with the lease of Agnes is partially to compensate for that as well.
So, and I understand that was sort of happening. There's two issues there. So they basically were resolved and everybody's happy? I'm assuming the delegation's not here, so they must be content.
Through the chair, my understanding is, yes, with this transfer of the land or the lease of the land, that would resolve that issue.
Okay, thank you.
to speak to it, Councillor Irvin?
Mr. Chair, it is a satisfactory conclusion to something that has been ongoing, and it does help solve that parking issue for the badminton club. So I would move it.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And that concludes. You have a question? Councillor Fernandez?
Yes, the Development Charges Reserve Fund information item, I have a couple of questions on that. Yeah, I need a motion, I know.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to move that out of information into discussion, please.
All those in favor? Opposed? Go ahead.
Thank you. Just specifically, oh, Mr. Chapman's not here. That's a problem. Is it possible, can you answer, Mr. Wilmer?
Through the chair, perhaps if those of us here can't answer your questions, we can take note of the questions and report back to you.
Okay. It's really just a simple question regarding the last page, which is, because it was noted in the report about, excuse me, our credit for service agreements, that we are actually significantly higher than we have been in the past. And I wanted, it's almost double from what we were in December of 2014. We were at 4.9 million, and in 2013 we were at 2.5 million. So I'd like to have an understanding of what is our capacity for these credit for service agreements, and if there's a tipping point between the balance for paying for our own work through DC's collected or credit for service agreements.
So through the chair, we will note that question and report back to committee with the response.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. That concludes the Community Infrastructure Service Committee agenda. Thank you.